Good morning. How are
Morning.
you? first item on the agenda. So welcome everybody. We have apologies for absence. Have we received any apologies for absence?
Yes, Chair, we've received apologies from Councillor Kerry.
Councillor Kerry, thank you. Any other? No. Okay, so we'll move on to the next item, which is declarations of interest. So if we have any members who have any interest to declare, this is the time to do it on any of the items that we are discussing on the agenda today. Any declarations of interest? No? Okay. So the minutes of last meetings, as pages 4 to 5, and is to approve as correct, to approve them as correct. So are we happy to approve them as correct? Are there any questions from any members? No? Oh. Yeah. So if you want to speak, can you just speak? Because I'm actually using my screen from the agenda, so I don't see everybody straight away. So if you want to speak, just state your name and then put your microphone on, if that's okay. Yep.
Hello, thank you, Chair. Councillor Birkin. Yeah. I'm not sure if it's a bit of a follow-up. We got the gender statistics pay gap passed on to us, and I just wonder whether it'd be possible to have a bit better explanation of what all the numbers mean, where we were last year, and if we have a target on that, and how we're faring with other authorities or wherever the comparisons are, please. So a bit more meat on the bones of those statistics. Is that possible, please?
Yeah, I mean, at this point, are you referring to the minutes of last meeting? Because at this point, all we're doing is we agreeing whether or not they're accurate.
Sorry, Chair, I'm jumping the gun. Yeah, I will second that they're accurate minutes. Yeah.
I'm sorry. Could you repeat that?
Sorry, I'm jumping the gun a bit. I apologise. I do agree that they are accurate.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Okay, so we all agree that the minutes are accurate. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the impact of pandemic update from the HR manager, and that's a verbal update. So if I could please ask Sarah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm just going to give you a brief update on where we are at the moment. Since the pandemic commenced and we went into lockdown on the 24th of March, we have had no employees test positive. During that period of time, we have had 96 employees who are self-isolated and 27 employees who have shielded. The shielding has now come to an end. That came to an end on the 1st of August. And in terms of those home working, we did send out some information to ask employees to confirm if they were home working or a hybrid or a mixture in terms of coming into the office and home working. So we just asked regarding their workstation setup and how things were going at home. And overall, the response has been positive. We received responses from 155 employees, and that information went back through to HR and through directly to the manager as well. So the manager has all the information that their team members completed regarding that. There were some issues identified with workstation setup, such as the chair, the screen and ICT equipment, and just being aware of the risk protocols if they were coming into the office. So we've had a couple of service managers forums during the last couple of months where we've gone over the guidance again, where information is stored so that it is accessible to them, and just to explain the expectations in terms of those coming into the office and those working from home as well. Make sure that we are giving sound advice and guidance and looking after employee welfare during this period. We are due to produce next week the latest sickness absence information, So hopefully we'll have some more data on that to be able to compare it to the last quarter, where we saw a significant decrease in sickness absence. And we're just in the process of re-looking at the workplace measures that were put in place at the very beginning of lockdown, because they were put in place on the basis of it being a short-term arrangement, but now we're having to look over the longer term. So that's things like flexi time, booking holidays, annual leave, and all about the guidance to do with self-isolation and what if children get sent home from school, do you need to self-isolate, etc. So I've had a meeting with the directors last week about that, and the guidance will hopefully be coming around shortly following consultation with trade unions. So that's the update for me from the moment, but happy to answer any questions.
Do we have any questions from members?
Yeah, Chair, can I ask a couple of questions of Sarah?
Yeah, Councillor Funnell, yeah.
Yeah, morning, Sarah. Morning.
Hello.
Sarah, just a couple of questions. The council has an home working policy anyway in place before COVID. How many people were actually working from home before the COVID epidemic started? The second question is, second question, when the council went into lockdown, when we all went into lockdown to work from home, how many of the council employees worked from home at that stage? And the third question, the same theme, how many people currently are working from home in the council today?
Okay, just to answer, it's quite a difficult one to actually, because we did have a home working policy in place, but what we've discovered is quite a lot of managers put in place ad hoc arrangements, because there is difference between someone being contractually to work at home as their base, contractually being a home worker, and then just the ad hoc arrangements for home workers. So during the course of this period, we have come across some arrangements that have been put in place with managers and employees regarding that. So in terms of giving a figure on the number of home workers, it will be, prior to lockdown, it will be a handful that were contracted. They were mainly in the contact centre, and those are the only ones I'm aware that were contracted to work at home. I can find out that figure exactly for you. Over the course of the lockdown period, those that have been home working, that's fluctuated. So to begin with, we were asking managers to complete a weekly return sheet to tell us the working arrangements within their teams, but that was more for monitoring staffing levels to make sure service delivery was happening. In terms of, what I can do is I can look back and get an average figure for you, because it will vary each week, because a lot of staff also went on to hybrid arrangements, so some time working at home but also some time in the office as well, maybe 1 day a week, 2 days a week, etc. In terms of the numbers working at home now, that is something that we are asking managers to confirm, and there is a home working group been set up, and I've been asked to wait for that group to complete their work before I go out and get that exact figure. Because I asked the question as to whether I could do that last week, but I got asked to wait until that home working group goes out and collects all that information. Based on the responses received, we're probably looking at, I would say, a third up to half of staff home working, but now there's much more hybrid arrangements in place, so lots of rota arrangements to enable staff to come back into work, as well as undertaking some home working. So unfortunately, I can't give you definitive figures because it changes all the time depending on if somebody is required in the office to allow them to undertake their work. So they might have a week in the office and then a week home working, or vice versa. So there is lots of different arrangements currently in place just to meet service needs, and managers have got the discretion to manage those within their teams.
Okay, thanks for that. Just one follow-up question to that.
Yeah.
In the protocol, it asks all employees that are home working to complete a weekly home working sheet.
Yes.
So is that being done?
Yes. So that is being saved, a bit like people's flexi sheets. Any days worked at home, they fill in a reconciliation sheet to let their manager know what work they've undertaken at home, and then the manager can look each week to see the tasks that have been completed at home. So yes, based on the feedback we've had from all managers, employees are saving those into their shared folders for the managers to be able to access each week.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Could I ask Councillor Birkin and Jones to turn their switch off their microphone off, if you don't mind, because I'm getting a lot of background noise. And thank you. Any other questions? Yeah, Councillor Birkin.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, one of the things that we're looking at with the home working policy is whether it's being applied properly and correctly. With Sarah saying that they found there were some ad hoc arrangements, I'm a bit concerned as to what the ad hoc possibly interpretations of the home working policy will be. Ask any views on that, please.
Yes, we're currently reviewing the home working policy at the moment, because what transpired is some employees have got into the mindset that every Wednesday they were to work at home because that suited them, and they'd come to that agreement with their line manager. What we were starting to see was a bit of a creep with that, in terms of people thinking that that was an entitlement and a right. And what the council was just doing was resetting expectations from that perspective, to say that home working needs to be flexible to meet the needs of the service as well. So if you have got a meeting or an appointment with somebody on the day that you believe you traditionally homework, expectation was that you would change your arrangements to accommodate that. So those are the kind of ad hoc arrangements that we were finding, that people seem to think they have a set day home working, and that was set in stone. So it was just about resetting expectations there, to say that, yeah, we'll try and accommodate that if it works for the service, but we've got to have flexibility on both sides really with that. And if there is a requirement to be in the building that day, then, you know, that is part of your contract of employment in order to carry out your job role.
Okay. I have a couple of questions, if I may, unless anybody else got any questions. No? Okay, so my questions, as you mentioned, obviously the sickness absence has been significantly down over the last quarter. So could you just give us reminders of what that figure is?
Just bear with me a second, so I haven't got it in front of me. I just got to get it up on my computer.
Okay, well, I'll ask you
right.
I'll ask you the next question while you're looking for the. So how are we doing a bit of a survey on why that is? Obviously, with regard to sickness absence, there will be all sorts of things. People are still working at home, even if they don't feel if they feel a bit unwell, because they don't have to travel. And sometimes so traveling, that is the main issue when you're feeling poorly. Because if you're not really poorly, you've got a cold or anything like that, you feel that you can still do some reduced duties. So completely understand that, but are we as an organisation doing a proper survey on why that is, and to find out the exact reasons why that sickness absence has gone down? Because we want to learn from that, how can we help keep that figure down going forward? And my next question is about redeployment. During the lockdown period, there was a number of our staff being redeployed to other duties. I just wondered how many of our staff were redeployed. The other question is what sort of issues were encountered, especially with the trade unions at that time, because we haven't got any report on that, which I thought we were going to get with the impact of the pandemic. That should be included in that. And also at the moment, do we still have people being redeployed? Okay.
Thank you. So just to cover the sickness absence to begin with, so the figure for last quarter, it was 1.17 days absence. Now, in comparison to the previous year, it was 2.28 days. So it has dropped significantly. But what we did see was an increase in short-term absence over long-term sickness absence. So this month, this quarter, it'll be interesting to see if the figures have stayed there or thereabouts, or we have experienced an increase. And as soon as I have that information, I'll make sure that gets forwarded on to you, so you do have that detail and that comparator. In terms of the reasons behind that decrease in sickness absence, it is something that we are looking into and is going to form part of this larger corporate home working group to have a look into the reasons why there has been a decrease. But I think you're right, it'll be because people are able to stay at home, so they might not be fully fit, but they feel that they are able to work from home. There will be the decreased interaction with other people that's been experienced during this period. So I know with all the children going back to school, a lot of people have now got colds. So that has had an impact in terms of the children not being at school as well. And also being able to manage your time a bit more flexibly to some extent has helped people as well during this period. But it is something that we need a bit more analysis on, just to have a look at also for the frontline staff who have remained at work, because their sickness levels remain steady, and is it the home workers and the office-based staff where we've actually seen that massive decrease. So when we get the next quarter's figures, and as part of this corporate home working group, that would form part of that project plan for there. So
Great.
yes, that's a point to look into.
So that'd be quite interesting for this committee to get to the report itself once you've done it. I think all of us will agree that we'd want to see that to kind of work towards our end reports next May. Councillor Jones.
Sorry, did you want me to answer the question on redeployment?
Yes, sorry. Yeah,
okay, that's all
okay.
right.
If that's okay, Councillor Jones, we'll go to the next question. Yeah. Redeployment.
Just on redeployment, yes, several members of staff were redeployed to the community response work, and some of the leisure staff were also redeployed into the contact centre as well to help deal with the number of calls that were coming through. So I can get you exact figures. I'm thinking it's around 20 to 30 that were redeployed, and they helped out on a range of things really, such as the pharmacy deliveries, the food deliveries, and assisting with things where the council needed support really, and taking things out to individuals and back as well. So sometimes they were supporting the ICT team and getting equipment back in them and sorted where updates were required. So a range of things was undertaken really, and some staff then went back to their substantive job roles, so such as the environmental health and planners, as their work started to increase. And then we asked other members of staff if they were able to support with the community response work as well. So there has been quite a range of individuals involved in that. There's nobody currently redeployed into other areas of work at the moment. And
the support from the trade unions, because obviously as councillors, we during lockdown, there was quite a lot of rumours going around, but we never had actual access to any other information, obviously. Cabinet member will have had the proper access, and the then leader will have that. So any feedback from you? Yes, in terms of the trade unions, overall, they were very positive and worked with us during this period of time. We dealt with them mainly, in my experience, on dealing with particular individual cases and how guidance and advice should be applied in those areas. So whether someone should self-isolate, whether they should attend to work. We've got people who wanted to come to work, but under the self-isolation rules, there was queries as to whether they should, whether appropriate risk assessments and working arrangements had been put in place for individuals. So there was lots of different scenarios and queries to deal with, and it's applying all those situations and factors into what would be the most appropriate response and approach to take. There were some challenges with the trade unions, particularly within street scene. You'll probably be aware regarding the green bin collections that was taken off for a short period of time. And it's a difficult one because there is often seen is a difference between frontline depot-based staff and office workers. And at the depot, what they saw was all the office workers home working and able to stay at home, whereas they had to come out and continue to work as normal. And perceptions on that can, have an influence on how individuals feel. But there were also other members of staff, such as the contact centre,
and other teams who had to continue to work as normal as well from council buildings. So I think it was a learning process for everybody, and there were some, as I say, some challenges with the trade unions, but often it was just a case of discussing and chatting that through and, you know, getting the facts of the situation rather than the rumours that might have been circulating around regarding particular situations. So it was hard to react as quickly to the ever-changing guidance as well, and that was difficult because people were coming to us, coming to the trade union reps saying, can I have an answer to this, can I have an answer to that, and you didn't have time to process things because the guidance and government announcements were coming out very quickly, and then you had to kind of give yourself time to sit down and work through what would be the best approach so that everybody is treated fairly according to their circumstances, and there was a corporate approach taken rather than just ad hoc you know, approaches taken. So it was you know, an interesting time, but overall largely trade unions and the council have worked well together.
Thank you very much. Any other questions for Sarah? Yeah, Councillor Maggie Jones.
Just a small point, really. When people were ill during the pandemic, I think a lot of people were very stoic, and it was also very difficult to get appointments with doctors and things like that, and hospital appointments. So a lot of people who may have been signed off by doctors probably weren't. I don't think it would make a big difference to your figures, but it is another part of it.
Yeah, you are quite correct there, and we know employees now are still struggling to get appointments with their GP and feedback on you know, their health conditions to enable us to support them at work as well. So that is an ongoing challenge that we are experiencing at the moment, and it does cause some worry and anxiety for employees if you aren't able to get that medical advice and support. And particularly around the COVID issues, sometimes employees are experiencing conflicting advice as well. So they come and ask us, you know, about what they should and shouldn't do because, you know, over the last couple of weeks, people have struggled to get a test, and it's, you know, really important that people do have access to that information so that they know what they should and shouldn't do, and they are getting the right advice. And as an employer, we are finding that we are having to assist employees with that on an increasing basis, really.
Angelique, can I ask one more question?
Yeah,
then I'll be
and then, yeah.
Sarah, you said, I think it was about 30% of employees have been home working during COVID. Have you noticed any deterioration in service delivery or business performance, or has that been maintained?
The feedback that we've had is that has been maintained. I think alternative approaches have been applied to delivering services, but as things over the last couple of months have started to change a bit, it'd be interesting really just to review where we are with that and how services are you know, performing at the moment. But I've not heard anything to say that a service isn't delivering what it should. It just might be using a different way to deliver the service that it previously used to apply. But it's something that we'd have to ask all managers just to give some feedback on. So it might be worth asking one, you know, a couple of the directors on that, because they would have the overall information back from the senior management team in terms of service performance. But I'm not aware of any particular issues or concerns.
Okay, thank you.
Lovely. And yeah, Councillor Birkin, and then we'll move on to the next item because we've got some interviews to do today. So, Councillor Birkin, yeah.
Thank you, Chair. I hope I'm not jumping the gun again, so I'll try to be brief. As we're looking at the application of the policy, could Sarah get us some statistics as to how many requests for home working were made in the last year? How many instructions from the council were given to instruct people to homework last year? And to ensure equality, what was the range of jobs, male, female or disabled, in both those areas, please? I know we've got to look at that sometime, whether this is the spot or the next item on the agenda. I'm not sure.
It is the next item on the agenda, one of them. But what I suggest is, are you okay to answer this question anyway, because it's linked to what we're looking at anyway, and then we'll move on to the next item, Councillor Birkin, and then we'll take things back on. Sarah?
Yeah, overall, prior to lockdown, we didn't have lots of requests for home working. Home working usually transpired as a result maybe of someone being on long-term sickness absence, and it facilitated a return to work. So overall, I can't think of any requests that we had prior to lockdown for home working. Obviously, on the evening of the 23rd of March into the morning of the 24th of March, all staff were asked to work from home wherever possible. So that was an instruction from the council that had to happen, and that applied to all staff who undertook a role that was able to be carried out at home. Obviously, over those initial few weeks, there was getting equipment and the actual practicalities of enabling people to work at home, but that was the instruction that went out during that period. In terms of the office roles, in terms of the roles that were able to be undertaken from home, obviously frontline roles, contact centres, some of the staff did remain at home, and there was a bit of a road arrangement in place, but it'd be street scene, obviously leisure services, we ended up furloughing those members of staff because they weren't able to undertake their work from home, but many of them were redeployed to the community response team, and it was largely those based in the offices that home worked.
Okay, thank you very much. So we'll move on to the next item, and then we've got to consider the home policy as well afterwards. So thank you very much for this update. Very useful and very interesting, actually. So a lot of useful information. Can I suggest as well, if any member feel that they have other questions after this meeting that have not that they've just not asked right now, we can do that by email as well, and I'm sure we can have some answers from Sarah on various issues. So if you think of anything else you'd want to know, perhaps contact Sue directly, and then it can be fed to the committee as well as part of our assessment as well. Okay, so we'll move on to the next item. Thank you very much. So the scrutiny review, which is page 8 and 50 for those who are following it on their agenda online. And the first item is to approve the project plan and timetable for the review. So Sue, would you like to run us through that?
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Try to get to it. Yeah.
Yes,
okay.
The first part is the project plan, and that's really sets out what you agreed at your last meeting. So it's just there in a completed document, so you can see what you've asked to be scheduled in for the year. Yeah. And then so obviously, if there is anything that's missing off there, if members just let us know, then we can amend that. But I think it was pretty comprehensive what you thought at the last couple of meetings when you discussed it. Yeah. And then there's a timetable, and I've completed that a little bit since the last meeting. You've probably noticed Rebecca sitting in the meeting room with us. She's agreed to come along and talk through the health and safety elements and how her team coped. And then you've got an interview from the Director of Environmental Enforcement, which is Karen Hansen. Yeah. And then you'll see on the next couple of meetings, there's those categories that you identified of people that you want to talk to. And I had a conversation with the chair, I think it was yesterday, Chair, where I've actually now put that notice on the internet that you requested, inviting staff to put the names forward to talk to the council. And you'll see the categories there, and pretty flexible about that. The idea is we'll have little mini discussion groups with groups of staff. Yeah. But obviously, Chair, if some staff members are a bit reluctant, I think as a mop up at the end of that, we'll also do some sort of gathering in thoughts if people put a submission in. Yeah. There'll be some people that feel a bit nervous about perhaps attending committee or saying something public.
And can I just, I'm trying to remember going through it, whether or not there was indication to the staff members that those discussions would be potentially via online meeting rather than in person.
Yes, Chair.
Yeah,
What we'll
okay,
do
so-
is do them in the normal meeting session. So it's the next two meetings on the 3rd of November and the 2nd of February. I think probably we will have to go into confidential session so people
Yeah.
can speak freely.
Yeah.
Because obviously we are live now, and there may be some things that obviously are confidential
Yeah.
to those staff involved.
Yeah.
But the idea is perhaps we'll have half a dozen people. We'll see what response we get, but half a dozen people in a room where members can have a question and answer session about, you know, the various things that you've been raising so far.
And staff are aware that that would be via Zoom.
Yeah, I've
Monday,
told them
yeah.
it'll be virtually, Chair, in the notice I've put out.
Good, good, good. Any questions on the plan and the timetable? No? Okay. So, I mean, I've not seen anything that was missing from the draft project plan. It's quite thorough what we're looking at. And hopefully, when it comes to May 21, I think it's May 21, we'll have a report and recommendations to put forward to the cabinet as per usual. Yes, Councillor Birkin.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quickie around the aims and objectives regarding what Sarah's just said about some ad hoc arrangements coming in. Can we make sure that one thing I think we need to look at is to make sure that the policy is not only being effective, but is being followed properly and fully by all managers in all areas. That speaks to the equality issues that are important about it. And I think as well on the key issues, we ought to be looking at, as well as potential benefits, perhaps potential problems, again, including equality issues, just as we drill down a little bit deeper into what's been going on. Thanks a lot.
Yes,
Okay,
Chair,
so I'm happy for this to be included, actually. The first point, aims and objectives, I think you're right in terms of the last item. We could potentially make sure that after it's effective, we do add and applied properly by all departments or something like that. I mean, I believe it would be covered by the fact that it would be effective, because the policy that's effective is a policy is also applied properly, and that's how it is effective. The key issues, yes, we could have a look at the potential issues with regard to working from home, because as well, and I think we discussed it, I'm not too sure which forum it was, but I'm sure we mentioned last time that not everybody will be happy working from home. And some people will have been very happy just at the beginning of lockdown to be working from home, and then 3 months down the line decided, well, that's not that as much fun as I thought it would be. So we've got to be mindful that we're not, we're looking at all the aspects. And I think that's why, from my perspective, we're really keen to speak to members of staff and to have their point of view. So that's a crucial point, I think. Yep. Anybody else on this item?
Yeah, can I just add one final comment, really, not a question, Chair? I think where the council has been through COVID is one set of circumstances, and that looks like that's going to continue for quite a while now, probably 6 months, maybe even longer. So the current operation is probably where it's going to be for a while. Going forward in the longer term, I do see this as quite a radical change opportunity. It could be a great opportunity for certain parts of the business, but it could also be a high risk for people as well, and for the business. So an individual preference is fine, and everyone will have their own particular preference, but you are still running a service and a business. So I think the management team are pretty key on how they think this is working. Can they make this work going forward? If you do go towards a radical change of, you could have 50% of people working from home. So I think the management team should certainly be part of the discussion process.
Yeah, definitely, and that's what we will be involving the management team as well in that in those surveys as well. Can I just say as well, I completely agree with you. I think that the crucial part for our assessment will be the next 4 to 5 months, because now we're entering, although we're still under some sort of lockdown and having to work from home a lot more than we might have wanted, but the initial crisis, if you like, we've dealt with, and now we've got systems in place to deal with all the lockdown issues that have been, so IT sorted, so all the things we've had to deal with under very exceptional circumstances at the beginning of lockdown, we've kind of resolved. So my point of view is that over the next 5 to 6 months, it's probably would give us a better picture on how the council performance, service performance is actually doing in terms of productivity, in terms of how managers are handling their staff, how flexible working is actually working for the council. So I think that's probably going to give us quite a lot of, and like you said, it's a big opportunity for this council, but we've got to be aware of the risks as well in terms of the service that we need to provide.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Lovely. So we'll move on to the next item, unless there are any other question on this item. The next item is the home working policy. So just going back to the, yes, to consider the working from home policy and associated documents. So what I would suggest is, Sarah, are you wanting to just give us a brief introduction? I know we've kind of touched upon that.
Yes, I can do. In terms of the home working policy itself, it is quite an old document that is, it is timely to review, particularly with the developments in technology and different ways of working. So it is good that we're getting lots of feedback on that now in terms of how that can work. And as you've mentioned, the changes to the workplace that have happened over the last few weeks would normally take years to implement and put in place. So, feedback on that home working policy and consideration as to how best we could implement home working arrangements moving forward would be really beneficial. I know a lot more staff now, like you mentioned, some were really against home working, but now they've had to try it, they actually see the benefits of that, and managers are getting more used to managing staff in that situation as well, which was also would have been in the past quite a big barrier to overcome. And now they've seen that it has worked, it has helped, and it's all the benefits of home working and the flexibility to both the council and the employee that it can introduce. So yeah, happy to receive any comments or thoughts on it, really.
Okay. Have we got any comments? One question before we start. So we're reviewing the home working policy. What timetable are you putting yourselves? When do you expect to have a revised first draft, at least, that we could consider?
Yeah, it's obviously there's quite a few people that need to be consulted as part of this process. So the normal steps that I have to go through with any new policy is that initially it would go to the senior management team to review. So we're at the point where hopefully within the next 2 to 3 weeks, a draft policy will be going forward to the senior management team, and then that would commence consultation with the trade unions. So I just need to check, but yes, I would have thought at that point, and we also consult with the managers, and employees will be involved as part of that process of feeding back through the union. So hopefully within the next month to 6 weeks, there should be a draft policy able to be reviewed.
Okay, so I'm just thinking we have a meeting of the 3rd of November. I just wonder if we could have some sort of, even if it's just the main headlines, but at least we've got an opportunity to see where we're going with it, and perhaps input some of our comments as well.
Yes, that's fine.
That's fantastic. Yeah, that'd be quite useful, and at least we've got a preview of what the council and as an organisation is looking at implementing that'd be great. Any questions or comments? Councillor Birkin, I know you've asked a question earlier. Do you have another question?
Thank you, Chair. A few things. Yeah, I'll try to be quick with them. 3.3 says one of the reasons for temporary working from home could be a backlog of administrative tasks. I would suggest that there may be other areas that need to be looked at vis-a-vis why the backlog built up, rather than just say, no, that's okay, you can go home and work on it quickly. I can see some issues there. In paragraph 4.4.1, process can take up to 14 weeks to complete. That seems an extraordinary long length of time. You know, a third of the year, a quarter of the year, whatever, a quarter of the year. I appreciate what Sarah just said about these lockdown as speeded things. Needs must, I think, is the watchword. But 14 weeks, it seems an heck of a long process, a heck of a long time. Sorry for that to take. The other thing I had was talking about the responsibility of the person at home, and we seem to be putting a lot of those onto them. Won't automatically pay any costs, despite the fact that there may be additional cost for heating, lighting, equipment, if it's their own equipment, broadband, that sort of stuff. They said the council would not usually reimburse any increase in insurance premium. So my question would be, would that be a reason for the individual to be able to refuse an instruction to work from home? And the next one, that was 8.3. The next one, 8.4, talks about employees' liability, which says it may however be very difficult to prove negligence on the part of the council because an officer working at home would be primarily responsible in his or her own working environment. But I think somewhere earlier it says that that would be checked out by, I think it's nearly even suggesting a line manager visiting at home. So wouldn't we require health and safety or somebody like that to check before an agreement is made? And then that would mitigate against the individual being held responsible, especially if we are requiring them to be working from home. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. So quite a few comments here. Do you want to come back on some of those comments, Sarah? If you have any.
Yeah, I can answer a couple of those. Thank you. Yeah, the timescales for implementing the home working policy, I'm not sure where the 14 weeks comes from. It does seem overly long for me. And I know when we've been dealing with individuals coming back from sickness absence, for example, we're looking to put home working in place, we've turned that round in a week. There are legislative requirements in line with home working in terms of the environment that they're working in, and I know Becky might touch on this later on, for insurance reasons as well. There are steps that we need to make sure the employee is aware of. In terms of the utilities costs, there is provision under the tax office rules that an employee can claim £6 a week for working from home. It is up to them to claim that, because obviously the council isn't aware of any, the other activities that might be taking place within an individual's home. So the individual themselves has to claim that amount. It's not something that the council can do for them, but we can advise them that is available for them to claim if they wish to do so. And some employees have done that during this lockdown period and over recent weeks. I'm just trying to think of the other questions there. Costs as well. Obviously, employees are experiencing less costs because they're not having to commute anymore to work. So there is a saving to the employee on that front as well. They may have to undertake travel during the working day if they undertake site visits, for example, or have to visit businesses like Environmental Health do. But in terms of travelling into the office, which would routinely have been a normal practice for employees, if they are working from home, obviously they are not incurring that cost. So that's something that is one of the benefits the employees of home working as well. But yeah, thank you for those points. I've noted them down and I'll make sure that they are considered as part of the policy. Thank you.
Chair, can I ask a couple more questions,
yeah,
Sarah?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
I've not looked into working from home seriously. I think it's a good idea. I think it makes a lot of sense. But does your home working from home, does your room become an extension of your business office? So does it become an home office, if you like? And if it does that mean the legislation involved with working in an office applies to your home? And I'm thinking things like pat testing of equipment, fire evacuation, all those sort of things that apply to a works office. Do they transfer to your home office? I'm not sure.
Yeah, there are some subtle differences, because obviously you're talking about the individual's own property rather than anything that belongs to the councils. So there is more responsibility put on the employee in terms of working from their own home rather than working from a council building. In terms of the detail and all the questions that you've just asked there and the factors that you've raised, I'd have to look into those in full detail, because the rules have been slightly relaxed over this recent period of time. But I know when that previous policy, the existing policy was put in place, there was quite a focus on insurance and liability and where that responsibility lied, and it does seem to fall more onto the employee than the employer. Obviously, both parties have a duty of care, so the employee has a duty of care to ensure that they're carrying out their work safely. But as a council as well, and as their employer, we have a duty of care to them. So we have to make sure that we've put all the steps possible in place to support them while working from home. I don't know if you have any more detail on that, Becky, that you might want to add at this stage in terms of home working. But it's something that we need to make sure is included in the guidance with the new policy, so that everybody understands the expectations on both sides.
In terms of home working, you're right, we've got limited influence over how people choose to set out their homes and how they operate. We have put together sort of a home working self-assessment checklist that asks them to consider, have they got a fire escape, or have they had the wiring tested, make sure that there are not sort of slips, trips and falls, and that they're careful with cables and that kind of thing when they are at home, because obviously, I mean, we physically haven't got the capacity to go out and do however many DSE assessments. We couldn't possibly visit everybody's home, so we give them the home working self-assessment checklist, gives them some things to think about within their working environment, and things that they maybe wouldn't have considered in the first instance. And obviously Sarah's team have put out lots of guidance on sort of working routines and maintaining that, so it is sort of an extension of your workplace, but we do have sort of limited influence. The biggest thing would be for DSE assessments, and currently we've put out a home working presentation for DSE. I know a lot of employees have taken equipment from the office, which is great, but also sometimes even with that equipment, they've not got a designated office space, so they're working from maybe a coffee table or the dining table. So we've tried to put some suggestions together on how they could utilise what they do have to best effect. But I think it would come down to sort of decisions in the future on whether or not they would have an equipment allowance and whether they could have desks or chairs. But again, it is whether they've got the space and the capacity to have that in their own home. Councillor Birkin, yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Just to show my stupidity, what is DSE? And I'd also have worries on the council's behalf. I appreciate what Rebecca just said about the potential volume of home workers and therefore checks that need to be done. But if there was a problem, if there's a problem, then I would fear that the authority could be liable, because giving a checklist, you're giving that to if you like amateur health and safety specialists, health and safety work is a specific and important and dedicated career, Rebecca herself shows. And so to put all the training, expertise and qualifications that such as Rebecca has had onto a noggin such as me, who's working at home for the first time, I think we could head for some potential difficulties there. I think we would need to tighten up on that side of it. But what is DSE? Sorry,
sorry, you get tied up in your own little acronyms. I do apologise. So DSE is display screen equipment. So basically, it refers to your keyboard and your laptop.
Thank you.
And we do offer sort of quite a bit of guidance. It's not that we've given them a checklist and expect them to be all right. We've also got a fact sheet on how to set up your display screen equipment. As I say, We've done a presentation showing how they can make best use of the home equipment. There's a DSE form, which again, I know it's self-assessment and possibly not ideal, but it sort of highlights any issues in the first instance that they would raise with the service manager. Might be as simple then as just, you know, asking if they can have a new chair, if they can have a laptop riser, and they're all quite simple. If there was anything significant and, you know, people weren't able to get comfortable in their own environment, then of course we could facilitate visits, but sort of do it for every employee. I'm, you know, thinking about frontline and who we've got at home. We've got about 200 home workers or something, but how, you know, having to drive between each location, and there's 2 of us, it would take a significant amount of time. But if there was any particular issues, then yeah, of course we could make that arrangement.
Yeah, it is important to understand that there is a degree of responsibility that is on the staff. In the same way as people working in an office, you do have to apply the health and safety guidance that are given to you by the organisation. But if a staff member is putting themselves at risk by not following the guidance, even within the organisation and inside the building, there's still some sort of responsibility that falls onto the staff. So I completely understand that point. So I've got Councillor Liggett on that.
All I was going to ask is, if you've taken home council equipment, if you have a break-in or the equipment gets damaged, are you covered by the council's insurance or your own home insurance?
I honestly don't know the answer to that one. I suppose it depends on the level of cover. Have you any thoughts on that one, Sarah? Have you got any idea?
No, I think it needs to come under the employees' insurance as well, because they need to, you know, if you're taking out buildings insurance and contents insurance, you need to make clear what, you know, is or isn't covered within that, and the actual break-in will have occurred at an individual's home. We have had situations before where laptops have been taken from cars, and that has resulted in some form of not full-on disciplinary, but we have raised that with the individuals to make sure they are following the guidance, and we don't expect things like laptops to be left on the back seat of cars for as a target for thieves. So there are some expectations in terms of how individuals will care for the equipment, but I think it comes under the individual's own insurance. But obviously the council will have some cover for the actual equipment itself, but in terms of it being taken from the individual's premises, I think it falls under their insurance, and it's part of what we'd have to look at with the home working policy.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, Councillor Potts.
Yeah, it's just a very quick one on data protection and security. I would imagine that this will be almost impossible to police in the working at home, you know, in terms of keeping documents secure, leaving them lying around the house, people possibly overhearing confidential conversations. How is that going to be managed?
We have put in place some steps so far. So areas where we know that could potentially be a concern, such as revenues and benefits. The staff have received training and guidance on what expectations are there. So if they do have any papers or things at home, they are to lock them away. If they are conducting telephone conversations with residents or any other customers, and then you need to make sure they are in a room where no one else can overhear that. They take care not to have their screen on open display, and like you would in the office, you lock your computer if you move away for it to take a quick break or anything, and follow the standard guidance with that. You're right, we can't go and see within everybody's home exactly how they are managing that, but we have made it clear to employees what the expectations are. As you would expect in the office, we expect people to try and maintain those same protocols within the home office environment.
Excuse me. So, yeah, thank you very much. I think we'll move on to the next item, if that's okay. But thank you very much. And we're looking forward to seeing that first draft. I think there's quite a lot of comments have been put forward by members, really useful from my point of view. So I'm sure some of those comments will be included in the feedback. Thank you very much. So the next item, so it's a selection of bulletins. So they were included with the documents. And Sue, could you just run us through drafting of questions? Could you just remind me what this is about? The drafting of questions for the interviews or for the staff survey that we're implying? I couldn't remember what we decided.
Right,
on
Chair.
this one.
It's just it could be both actually, but obviously Rebecca's going to have a discussion with you later.
Yeah.
But then we're going to go into these mini groups. So it's whether you want to put any questions together in those groups, so you're asking the same things to the groups, or which is what we normally do. Then you can triangulate between them, or whether you're going to have a more fluid thing where you just ask questions on the day. It's really for the committee to decide, Chair, what you think is most appropriate.
Okay, so Rebecca, do you want to come in on the bulletin as well, just to give us a quick overview of what was included in the pack? And it's about the health and safety bulletins. Is that the ones you mean, Sue?
No, I think the bulletins, Chair. I think they came out from Sarah's team. Did this, Sarah? Right. Okay. Yeah, because there was quite a long, quite a few, all the bulletins that you put forward to staff throughout the lockdown period, which was quite impressive. So that was really good. So do we want to just make comments on those, or have any question to Sarah then in this case? Councillor Liggett.
Sarah, are we talking about the employees' wellbeing updates?
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Because
so there
I
was
just wondered how employees at the Eckington depot who don't get the extranet were supposed to have seen them.
They were put up on the notice boards and circulated, is my understanding, by the managers. So anytime we send anything out to service managers or anything is placed on the extranet, the managers and office-based staff there make sure it gets put up on the notice boards at the depots, both at Eckington and at Doley, where the North East staff work out of as well.
Right. Have you any ability to go and check whether that was actually done? Because my husband said he'd never seen any of them before.
Okay, yeah, I can ask the question and just check what term provisions were put in place by the managers at those sites. So yeah, that's no problem. I'll check that out.
Thank you.
That'd be useful. Yeah, thank you very much. Any other questions on the bulletins?
Yeah, just one more question about the wellbeing update. The last one I've got, sir, is the 9th of July. Have you printed any more since then?
No, we provided 2 every week from March through to the end of July, and then we haven't done any since now. Because what we have done is we've done, as Rebecca mentioned, we've contacted every member of staff regarding their DSE setup. So we've been focusing on the home workers because we were conscious that the home working arrangements were going to go beyond a few weeks into potentially months. So we've been asking managers to focus on dealing with any issues or concerns that staff have raised during that process. And then I'm happy to take on, if people feel that those bulletins were helpful, we can reinstigate them again. Obviously, probably on a bi-weekly basis rather than twice weeks. It's quite a lot of information to digest for people.
Yeah, I thought twice weekly was pretty ambitious.
Yeah.
But to go from twice weekly up through to July and then suddenly stop, I just wondered why did you stop doing it?
Well, we also, it was something that we were asked to do by Councillor Thacker. It was initiated as well from him in terms of the twice weekly bulletins. But as at the 1st of all, well, at that point, we thought staff would be moving back and coming back into the office environment on a more regular basis. And obviously that hasn't transpired in practice as we're now experiencing the second wave. So we had started prior to lockdown having a quarterly health and wellbeing bulletin. We'd only got the first one of those out. It was about 6 pages, just with all the events and things that we'd planned during this year, because there's a lot of things that haven't happened as a result. We would have had the North East Summer Social event out in the Quad. We would have had our normal Macmillan coffee morning taking place. And we would have focused on every month particular health and wellbeing themes. But because of the recent events, that hasn't transpired, but it is something that we need to look at now and see what we can put in place moving forward based on the new environment that we're working in.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think during lockdown, the twice weekly probably was required because of the anxiety from all sort of managers, staff, counsellors. Nobody knew what was going to happen or how we were supposed to deal with some of the issues that we were put in front. So I think twice weekly probably was required. But as we're progressing and people are getting used to the new normal, I'm not sure every quarter. I would prefer something a bit more regular, every 3 months, every 2 months. But obviously, you will have an idea of when people actually pick things up. From my experience, if you get emails constantly, you end up ignoring them because these health and well-being bulletins, and it's no offense to anybody, but they are quite repetitive, and they have to be repetitive because that's the nature of the business. We can't invent issues all the time, so they're quite repetitive. And I found that if people are getting emails constantly, they end up ignoring them. So to have more impact, sometimes it's better to have one good email every so often rather than loads of emails that people are going to end up ignoring. Councillor Birkin.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, firstly to say I thought those briefings, the updates looked very good, very effective, very efficient, and lots of good general information there. I could have done with reading a few of those myself maybe a few months ago. I agree with you that you can be flooded with emails. It's a bind. I think I found it particularly difficult. But I think, again, despite that, it is worth reminding people about what's around it. We're tending to forget it. This is most probably why we're going into a second wave, because we've all forgotten about washing our hands or 2 meters apart or don't touch your face and all those simple little things. So I agree. I think there should be a regular thing, maybe once a month-ish, 3 weeks, something like that. Because I think it looks like a very good service. I would have appreciated that if I was working with the council at this point in time. So well done, Sarah, on that one.
Do we have any other comments or questions on those bulletins? No. Councillor Jones?
Yeah, I'm just, what I was thinking is that a lot of people, when they be isolated like this, they miss out on the camaraderie in the office and information from other people. And I think that's quite important for them. So perhaps we could look at ways of getting people that are home working to actually communicate with each other on an informal basis, but just to keep that going so they don't feel isolated completely and still feel part of the team, because that's quite important, really. So that was just one of the things I was thinking about, because, you know, the things that normally went on, people go for a walk in the lunch hour and things like that. So they actually met and talked, and it was a sort of social side to it. So if we can work out ways to kind of keep them links going, that's just the comments I want to make.
Thank you. So these comments could be passed on as part of the home working policy and how we carry on with supporting our staff in terms of health and well-being. Right, okay, so we move on to the next item because we're quite behind our schedule. Sue, so could you just remind members, so the questions, you mentioned on the agenda the questions, preparing questions. So I just wondered if members had any questions specifically that they wanted to have answered.
If I could say, Chair,
yeah.
Rebecca's going to do more a question and answer discussion session, because obviously it's health and safety and that's played a key role.
Yeah.
The questions I was particularly thinking about was when we came to the mini discussion sessions with staff. Perhaps to save time, if it's all right, Chair, would you be happy if members just sent potential questions to me?
Yeah.
And I'll liaise with you to get a final draft, which we can ask
Yeah.
at those mini little discussion sessions.
I would suggest that probably would be the best way forward. So if members could just have a think about some of the questions they want to ask the staff when we meet them, or in terms of how they were looked after during lockdown, or what they found quite helpful, not helpful, just so that it can feed our assessments moving forward with home working. So if you could send those emails and copy everybody, all members, send them to Sue, copy myself, the chair, and all members, so we don't repeat each other's questions. So it might be more effective that way. And we'll put a list of questions ready for the next session.
Thank you, Chair.
That's fantastic. Yeah, thank you. So we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is moving on to interviews. So members will remember we agreed a number of interviews that we would like to proceed with. So the first interview is Rebecca Hutchinson, who is a health and safety coordinator. So Rebecca, welcome. And apologies, you've had to wait a little bit. So would you like to give us, first of all, a quick presentation about your overall duties, especially, obviously, we're quite keen to hear about the lockdown issues. But after that, first, shall we introduce ourselves? Because, Rebecca, we've not met you before in this forum. So I'm Angelique Foster. I'm a councillor for Dronfield and the chair of
Morning, Rebecca. I'm Councillor Joe Birkin, councillor for Sutton-cum-Duckmanton ward, the posher area.
Councillor Potts.
Morning, Rebecca. I'm Mo Potts, and I'm a member for Killamarsh West, and I'm deputy chair. Thank you.
Councillor Funnell. I'll just
Morning,
name you, it's quite easier, isn't it?
Yeah, that's okay. Morning, Rebecca. I'm John Fennell. I'm councillor for Morton, Pilsley, Stretton and Woolley-Moor.
Councillor Liggett.
Good morning, Rebecca. My name's Heather Liggett and I'm district councillor for Shirland, Stonebroom, Brackenfield, Wessington and Higham.
Councillor Jones.
Yeah, I'm Maggie Jones and I'm councillor for Claycross South, which includes Gainsmore.
And Councillor Wright.
Yes, good morning. I'm Councillor District Councillor for Dronfield North.
Okay, I think that's all the councillors. Okay, so Rebecca, over to you.
Okay, thank you. So I'm Rebecca, I'm Health and Safety Coordinator, Joint Officer with North East and Bolsover. I am in the position of understudy for Bronwyn MacArthur Williams today, so hopefully I'll be able to answer everything that you want to know. So do you just want me to go through what we've done during the lockdown period? Is that
yeah, if you want to just give us a quick overview, and then we'll ask you some questions, if that's okay.
Okay, yeah, of course, yeah,
that'd be great.
Well, I mean, like us all, like for all of us, it's been particularly challenging, and as I know Sarah mentioned earlier, that sort of trying to keep up with the guidance and then translate that into our teams that are out there working was particularly challenging. You seem to get a guidance note together and off it went, and then 2 days later you needed to change it again. But that's just an evolving situation. So it's been quite a dynamic sort of situation. But I'm sure we're all aware of that. We've put out several pieces of guidance. One of the largest would be the COVID-19 protective measures guidance note. That's currently in its 4th issue and it's due for another review by the end of tomorrow, which we've done. It just needs sending out. So that sort of details, the measures that key workers that they were initially, then they went to frontline workers, and then just generally, people that are out there meeting customers, the measures that they would need to take to keep themselves safe. It was all a little bit intense, to be perfectly truthful, in the first instance, but has become, as we've moved towards this new normal, become relatively simple in terms of, the need to keep the distance, and that's your initially, that's the main control measure, ensuring that they're washing their hands frequently and correctly, and then when they can't do that, then we can then put in the mitigation of wearing face coverings and the different types of working, the cohort working, using screens side by side, that kind of thing. So that's sort of the overarching one, and I think that formed a basis when it initially came out for David Broom's protocol for the Mill Lane building. He's took responsibility and ownership for that and developed that. So the risk assessment side of things was looked after from the ground by David. We've done quite a lot on sort of home working. As I say, we've got the self-assessment checklist. We initially put out some health and safety tips for working at home, sort of very brief bullet points, which we expanded on over time. And that initial health and safety tips is due to be withdrawn because it's no longer relevant. We've got the DSE presentation for home working so that people can see some scenarios and relate them hopefully to their home situation. And I have to say, we've ruthlessly exploited our poor apprentice for that, because she's in all of the photographs demonstrating everything, but I think she was all right with it, really. We've also been trying to sort of ensure that we've got the COVID secure standard at all of our buildings. So we've been doing COVID secure inspections. So just sort of spot checks again to make sure that distancing markers are in place. People are wiping down frequently contacted points, that we can observe people social distancing, that hand sanitizer, disinfectant, paper towel, that kind of thing is all available. We've worked quite closely with leisure teams. So obviously the leisure centres were closed initially and then sort of opened up mid-July. We worked quite extensively with those teams, sort of visiting each site as they were developing the procedures, because it got sort of 4th of July and then it got delayed a bit, so everything was changing again all the time. And then we did pre-opening checks and inspections for them, and been back since to sort of make sure that they were okay and they knew sort of what they wanted. And basically we've responded as requested, to service managers' needs if they've needed us to. We've been generally working at home, but if they've needed us to visit, and been able to contact us via email, obviously phone. We've also got Zoom. So we've gone wherever we've been requested. Participating as well in the home working group, because obviously that's going to be a big issue moving forward, as well as the bigger adaptations that we've had to have up to now. And possibly some challenges with that, as we said briefly, would be the provision of equipment, whether people have got the space at home, and whether we give them an allowance or manage it in some other way. I think that's everything I've got. If there's anything else you need to know, please let me know.
Do we have any questions for Rebecca? Thank you. I think a lot of the aspects has been we've discussed as we went along, didn't we? So it's quite useful information, but it just shows how everything links into everything links together anyway. In terms of health and well-being specifically, any other questions from members? We did discuss about the health and well-being of the staff working at home, and how that's the implication of who's responsible for applying this. And as I said before, my view is that there's a level of responsibility that has to be put on the staff to make sure that they actually get the one thing that, and I can't remember, so you'll have to forgive me if that was done, because there was so much, again, there was so much information coming through. And for us who are dual hatters or triple hatters, like me, there was so many different information coming through from different councils, but I didn't see a lot of things coming through from this organisation for advice to counsellors about home working and the workstations. And the reason I'm saying that is very early on, I ended up with a very bad neck because I'd forgotten, about using the iPad. And because we were spending so much time on the iPad looking down, I ended up with a very bad neck until I realized, okay, so I ended up buying myself something where I could have, which I'm using now, the screen actually facing me and high up. So I'm actually facing the screen now. But I just wondered, in terms of counsellors who are not used to working in an office environment, most of us, because we're always out and about, and suddenly we found ourselves working a lot at home on equipment that we might have just picked up every now and then, usually. And there wasn't a lot of, I don't know what your impression is as counsellors, but I didn't feel there was a lot of kind of reminders or advice. So correct me if I'm wrong. I might have missed them going through it, but I see a few of the counsellors nodding. We do need looking after as well.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. I suspect that's got sort of missed. I know we were definitely focused on employees. Everything went out to service managers, but obviously you guys wouldn't get that information. So, I mean, would that kind of information be useful? Like, we can make sure that we get that shared.
I think it will. Yeah, I think moving forward, obviously, I've kind of read up on things and realized that it's probably not a good thing to kind of look down to your iPad constantly. So I've kind of worked things out a little bit, but obviously not everybody will have access to information like that, or be used to look for the information. It'd be useful to have some health and well-being advice sent to counsellors as well. Okay. Councillor Potts.
Just to endorse that, Councillor Foster, I would agree, and that is one of the points that I've got written down that I wanted to bring up. That this is very much. This should very much involve counsellors as well, because we weren't used to working from home. And like you, I've had the same problem, and this is my iPad stand. And I would find it very useful if we were included on these bulletins. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Okay. What I'll do is I'll take back to our team then, and we'll put together all the information that we've shared with employees as a bit of a pack, and just make it sure it's shared with all of you, if that's okay.
Yeah. Councillor Birkin, you wanted to ask a question? Oh no, right, okay. Anybody else? Yeah, Councillor Jones.
Yeah, I mentioned it last time about my granddaughter's actually working for an examining board at the time, and she was having to work from home in isolation, and she was getting a lot of flack of people ringing up because it was going through, what's going to happen about the exams and all that. And she found that very difficult. And it's about us dealing with people who are angry, and staff as well, having to put up with this in their own home. And she found that very, very difficult. So I just wonder if there's anything we could give people so they feel that they've got some backup on that.
I'd ask Sarah if she's available to come in on this. I know we've got the Be Supported helpline, and for me, I think that would be the sort of go-to for people if they were struggling and experiencing difficulty while they were at home.
Yeah, I'd agree. We do have an employee assistance programme, which quite a few organisations do now, and I know many other local authorities that didn't have one to begin with have signed up to one during the course of this lockdown, which provides 24-hour and 7-day-a-week services on a range of issues that employees and their family members can access. We have had quite a few conversations with managers about those struggling to work at home and struggling with the self-isolation, and we are looking at mental health and working on what initiatives we can put in place now, given the new environment and the new normal that we are working in, where things like this are coming more to the fore. So as mentioned previously, I think there is a lot of information out there regarding wellbeing, and it's just making sure that you put that into a easy to understand and digestible format for individuals, and that is relevant to them as well, and making sure you're giving the right advice, because there's lots of theories and ideas out there, and it's about what works for you as an individual as well. There isn't a right or a wrong answer for everybody. It's just making sure that the things that we have got in place, do work for everybody, but a range of options are offered.
Councillor Birkin, did you have your hand up or no? Okay. Any other questions? I have one more question, but if any member have got a question first. Okay, so my question, Rebecca, then, so we've kind of discussed all the health and well-being issues, the bulletin that are going through. I just wondered, from your point of view, moving forward, because obviously we're going to work on this working from home policy, reviewing it. Do you have any comments, or that you already feel that moving forward will need to be implemented, will need to be part of that home working policy in terms of, from your perspective, during lockdown?
Nothing in particular at the moment. I mean, I know there's we're part of the home working group that is looking at this issue corporately, and I know quite a few things have been sort of brought to the table there, and I think it's being considered as a holistic issue, so we're looking at it from all angles. I think, from the benefits possibly and the drawbacks as well, but I don't think there's anything at this point that hasn't been considered in terms of working from home sort of long term. But I think it's quite clear that there are no easy answers, and sometimes when you answer one query, you find that you've given yourself another one. But that's the great thing about having a variety of officers on this group. So we're also looking at it from different perspectives. Yeah. Okay.
And are you satisfied, from us perspective, from another council? I know that the survey that's come back from after lockdown. Well, still in some sort of lockdown, but during the summer, survey was done to staff who were working under lockdown, and in terms of their mental health, and it came back quite positive in terms of how staff had coped with the mental health, how they were felt supported by the council. So I'm talking about a completely different organisation. Have you had any feedback in terms of we've spoken about the physical side with the back and things, but in terms of mental health, which is quite an important issue now?
Yeah, to be fair, the mental health aspect really sits with Sarah's team, because it's a bit, I think it's a bit more of a confidential issue. We're more, broken backs and that kind of thing. So yeah.
Okay, so you don't share that responsibility, Sarah, then?
No, that's fine. I'll give you an overview of where we are with that. We have, and that was one of the reasons behind the health and wellbeing bulletins as well. It has come more to the fore in terms of mental health and wellbeing during recent weeks. And as part of the practices that we've encouraged managers to do is have that regular contact with their team. Both in team meeting setup, so you are getting that engagement with other colleagues, but also on a one-to-one basis as well. So reminders were sent out to managers to make sure they're having as a minimum weekly contact with individuals, depending on how big their team was. But often it would be daily contact, both from making sure that work activities are being undertaken and services we're performing, but also just to check in and have that chat with individuals. From working in the office throughout the period, often I did find employees did come in just to say hello and to chat, because there were so few people in the building. They did enjoy coming in and seeing somebody face to face if they were nipping in to print some information out. And sometimes, when you were dealing with queries, you would have a longer conversation with somebody because they were working at home, and they just said, "Oh, it was nice to have a chat with you. I've not spoken to you for a while or seen you for a while." So it is something that the council will have to look at on a longer term basis to put those steps in place. And as Becky says, we've focused a lot on the physical, but also on the mental side of it as well. But that is an ever-growing area of work, with different research and theories coming in all the time. So that is going to be, really something interesting to get our teeth into moving forward as well, because it is going to be so diverse and dynamic moving forward. And it's making sure we get that right support out there for individuals, and taking into account each individual circumstance as well.
Okay, yeah. Thank you. So any other questions? No. So thank you very much, Rebecca. You're welcome to stay if you want, but at the same time, equally, we know that you might be a very busy person. So happy if you feel that you need to pop out.
Okay, I will. Thank you. Thank you for having me, and been nice to meet you all.
Yeah, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
And we'll see you soon.
Bye-bye.
And we have the next item, which is a presentation from Karen Hansen, and I see that Karen has just joined us with questions and answers. Karen is the Director of Environment and Enforcement. Welcome, Karen.
Thank you. Morning. That was really good timing, wasn't it? Excellent. Thank you. I'm just going to see if I can share my screen. So I don't know who's Sue. Are you hosting the session?
No. There's a number of people. We've got Amy Brandt who's just come on screen, so I think she'll
just made you co-host, so you should be able to.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, let's get started. Okay, can everybody see what's on the screen? Can everyone see the presentation?
Yeah.
Okay. Let me just move that out of the way. Right, okay, so thank you for inviting me along. I know that you're going to be doing, I'm not sure what you've already discussed this morning, so I really hope that I don't duplicate what's already been said, but what I thought I would do, and I can come back at a later date if you want me to look at anything more specific, but what I wanted to do this morning was to set the scene really in terms of what happened from the 23rd of March onwards in the council, how we managed from that moment onwards to make sure that we had resources in place, the business continuity arrangements, and kind of setting the scene for what we're doing over the next 6 months. So I was just going to talk you through that, and then I'll be able to answer any specific questions. And I know that Sarah will have a lot more information than me in terms of detailed documents and procedures that have been out to staff, etc. So I'm just going to do a little bit of scene setting, if that's okay. So on the 23rd of March, you'll be aware that the Prime Minister announced to everybody on the national television about the lockdown measures that were going to be taking place. So I am the emergency planning lead for the council and the business continuity lead in terms of the Civil Contingencies Act, and we are required to make sure we have arrangements in place and that we're prepared for any emergency arrangements or emergencies that may occur. So what I did on that night was speak to both of the leaders at Bolsover and North East Derbyshire in terms of what we were going to be putting in place immediately to protect the staff from the arrangements that nationally we're required to put in place that night. So at 9:30 on that evening, I sent an email out to all of the heads of service, and I just want to give you a flavour of that. I trawled through my emails last night and managed to find it. So basically, we asked all staff to stay at home from that point onwards, except those who were registered as priority 1 services. So things like waste collection, all of those kinds of business continuity arrangements, services that were required to carry on as normal. But we said that we would speak to all the heads of service in the morning, the next day. If staff were unable to work due to lack of equipment, we would deal with that urgently, and could they make best endeavours to ensure that all staff are aware of the updates so that they didn't come into work, and that we were able to put in place the measures that we needed to do to comply with the new guidance that came out that evening. Okay, so what did we do from the next morning onwards? We did an urgent visual check of the Mill Lane office to make sure that all staff had got the message. We sent some home, we spoke to others, we discussed which services needed to continue from the office and which could be done from home. We then had some very early discussions. I remember driving into work on that morning, speaking to Steve Brunt about the street scene services. Because we have a statutory duty to collect waste, as you'll be aware. We've also had grounds maintenance staff, which isn't statutory duty, and other things like MOT testing and parts of the depot which are available to the public. So we had to have some urgent discussions around which parts of that service we would continue that day. We then set up an emergency control centre. So for those of you who are not aware, I then sat in the members' room for the next 3 months every day with Matt Broughton, basically controlling what was happening across the whole of the council in terms of service provision, working very closely with the leader, with cabinet and members, with the comms team and with partners to make sure that we were able to continue and to look after vulnerable people as well. Business continuity plans were initiated, and myself and Lee Hickin met with the leaders to agree how we would split ourselves between the two councils. So we agreed that as a one-off measure, Lee Hickin would go to Bolsover and I would work in the Mill Lane office permanently, so we weren't wasting time driving from one building to the other and kind of trying to cover both councils between us. So I concentrated exclusively on North East Derbyshire. We arranged for letters of authorisation so that all key workers were able to travel freely if they got stopped by the police. We asked all managers to contact staff that day, and then ICT set about their massive task of ensuring that home working would be able to go ahead, that we had hardware, software, security arrangements, telephony in place, and that went on for some time. Okay, so we also sent out daily emails, you'll be aware of those, from the leader to all staff and all members to make them feel engaged with what we were doing, so people didn't feel left out in the cold and that they weren't concerned about arrangements that were in place. And we tried to make it as accessible as possible so that people could ask questions of anybody, whether it be the leader, myself, HR, their own service managers, etc. We issued, and Sarah very quickly went into action to issue workplace measures. So we've got a temporary workplace procedure document agreed by the trade unions by the 26th of March. We've refreshed it 3 times since then, and we're now looking at a further one at the kind of phase 2 of the, or wave 2 of the coronavirus measures that we're now looking at. But we've made some very clear arrangements for staff, which I'm sure Sarah will go through with you in more detail as part of your programme. We considered all government advice. You can imagine it was coming out hourly to start with, across a huge range of service areas, everything from the provision of funerals to events, to training, to environmental health officers' requirements, regulations, all sorts of government advice and guidance were coming out on a very regular basis. We engaged with trade unions, and we also got to work immediately in terms of procurement of PPE, which is protective equipment. So things like gloves, the face masks, all of the hand sanitizers. We wanted to make sure that staff had everything available to them, whether they were working from home or working out on the patch, so to speak. Okay, the Local Resilience Forum, which you may be aware of, it's the LRF. Every area across the country is required to have a Local Resilience Forum. So every emergency that you'll be aware of that happens, things like big flooding events, the dam issue that we had last year, all of those types of events will be managed by a Local Resilience Forum, and they're partners around the table that can state that we're having an emergency event. They can put in place loads of arrangements, call on lots of funding to ensure that residents and businesses and life itself is protected as much as possible. Those gold meetings, which are called the Strategic Coordinating Group, SCG, for COVID, have been ongoing since that first day. So they were initially daily, 7 days a week, which I dialed into. They then moved to 3 times a week, and then weekly, and then they got to fortnightly until they started to ramp up again. So now with the second wave of the virus, we're now back to weekly Monday morning meetings across that strategic group. We're also, as a council, we also are part of the tactical group and the subgroup. So there's subgroups set up around things like recovery, around cohesion and enforcement issues, policing, all sorts of different subgroups looking at communications and to make sure that we're coordinated across the whole of the county. And initially as well, to start with, we had regular SAMPT meetings. So the Strategic Alliance Management Team, which is made up of the directors and the heads of service, met every day to make sure we were aligning our message for staff and that we were all working together, picking up good ideas from each other. So over the next 4 months, April, May, June and July, we set up the community support
Can I just ask Karen, my apologies, but I know you're sharing your screen, but it's not flicking through. So
I don't
know if it is another.
Are you on the one that says April to July?
No.
No. Oh.
So I don't know what it's like for all the members.
Amy, can you do it? If I stop it, can you share it?
Yeah, that's fine.
I'll stop mine. I'll send this out to make sure that you've got it because we're halfway through.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't realise.
Yeah, that'd be useful. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, it's on my screen, but it's not flicking through. I thought it was a long introduction.
That's what I thought. And then you mentioned about dates again, and I thought, well, I must have missed the last one then.
No,
yeah, that's better. Thank you.
I've got it now.
Yeah, we've missed the first 4 slides. Sorry, it's flicking through on my screen, but clearly not working through to yours. So sorry about that. I'll make sure it's sent out with the notes. Okay, so April to July, we set up the community support team, and we had a large number or a number of staff who were unable to work from home for various reasons because it wasn't the kind of job that you could do from home. For instance, we had leisure staff, particularly where we closed the leisure centres, who volunteered, and it was a really good piece of work in terms of everybody kind of hands to the pump, getting things done for the benefit of our communities. So we set up a community support team. We had members of the contact centre phoning vulnerable residents for weeks on end to make sure that they were okay. We seconded staff into the roles. We looked at the shielding arrangements and worked with Derbyshire County Council to get food boxes out to people. We made telephone contact with vulnerable residents and did food deliveries, medicine deliveries, working very closely with Ricknold Homes. We set up food collection points at the food banks, and we also tried to assist with mental health arrangements with jigsaws, games, magazines. We sent out copies of the Derbyshire Times to the most isolated. I think there were about 30 people that were so isolated and were feeling so terrible at that point that we tried to engage them with some local news and telephone them daily. And so the group of staff that did that were really, really engaged with that. I think they enjoyed it and really made the best that we could with those particular individuals who weren't able to work from home. Okay, Amy, can you move that forward? Okay, is that changed for you? Yeah. Okay, so we also regularly reviewed the arrangements both for home working and for Mill Lane. We've got a risk assessment set up for all service managers to risk assess what's happening on the ground. We set up the sanitising stations with all of the hand sanitizer, and we did a big piece of work which took a few days really to count the number of desks in the offices. We looked at the 2-metre rule, how many people we could get per area, marked those spaces out. You'll have seen lots of 2-metre stickers all over the buildings to make sure that the staff were working safely in accordance with the rules. We also looked at other places, so Eckington Depot, Coney Green, all of the council's business premises as well. And for street scene in particular, we reviewed all of the plans. We put back a phased return of some of the services. You'll be aware that we took green waste out for a few weeks so that we could concentrate on safe working arrangements for the residual waste collections. But eventually we brought all of that back in place with safe working arrangements where we possibly could. And then Sarah's team have done a really good job as well to weekly monitor self-isolation, staff, sickness levels, weekly returns on how many staff we've got working and whether staff were doing everything they could to work from home. Thanks, Amy. Okay, so we've also undertaken a home working survey. So we asked people what they thought about working from home. By this point, we were kind of April, maybe May time. It became quite obvious to us that some staff, luckily not a huge number, but some staff were struggling a little bit more with home working than others, particularly single people who felt quite isolated and lonely. We had maybe 2 or 3 where we had to really contact them regularly to make sure that their mental health was being looked after and that they felt supported by the council with their work, and we did everything we possibly could for them, and we continue to do that. We've done a workstation assessment to make sure that people aren't working on their laps on the sofas, that where possible we've got equipment in place. We still have some work to do on that. We've had those questionnaires back and we're still working our way through them. But I'm hopeful, and I think Sarah might be able to help with this one, but I'm hopeful that staff are aware that they can come to us and request additional equipment if they need it, or if they've got any issues with their workstation, that they're aware that they can bring that up with the managers, and we'll do everything we can for that. We made constant contact around mental health issues, which I've just mentioned. We're also very conscious that some staff had childcare responsibilities and we had to put in place flexible working arrangements. Those staff didn't particularly want to take annual leave. They were happy to work from home, but we had to be very flexible in what they could do and how they could do it. And we allowed working up to around 11 o'clock at night for some individuals if they needed to start later and finish later, to get the work done, but also to support their families, and especially families that were in isolation. To get services back to the new normal, and also just to mention there that we've also taken on a lot of additional responsibilities in environmental health. So all of the new COVID Act, COVID regulations around enforcement, particularly in business premises and restaurants, we've had to do a lot of extra work for that. So people have been very, very busy in that team. Okay, thanks, Amy. Okay, just to carry on with what we've done, we've provided a lot of advice to staff who were shielding or vulnerable, part of that vulnerable group. And some people had families that they were very concerned about. So just to give you a couple of examples, somebody in our street scene service had a child that was born very prematurely, is now not a baby anymore, but still has issues in terms of breathing and other kind of respiratory problems, and was very concerned about coming into work. So we did a lot of risk assessments for individuals, taking into account their family circumstances, to make the best use we could of staff, but to take into account what they also needed to do. You'll be aware we brought in furlough arrangements for some staff in leisure particularly, and we also sent out a twice weekly health and wellbeing bulletin. For 12 weeks, it was a big piece of work that Sarah's team did with that. We set up a toolkit for managers to put all of this information into one place so that they could find it easily. And we sent updates on a regular basis to ensure everybody was engaged. And then finally, extranet articles. You'll be aware that we tried to do as much communication as we could with staff, with members, all sorts of people, to make sure that they were aware of what was going on. Okay, what's next? I think is the next slide. Yeah, so this is what we're doing now. Just to give you a quick update, I'm near the end, so we're continuing to regularly review working from home arrangements. We make regular contact with staff. and we're continuing to make sure that the office is COVID secure. And that's become business as normal, to be honest. All three of those areas now are part and parcel of everyday work, everyday life. We're working with Sarah and with other managers on the home policy, working from home refresh. And we're also looking at the second wave arrangements, because we're very conscious that the winter may bring us a bit of a multiple issue situation. So we could be looking at, for instance, heavy snowfall with COVID, perhaps flu as well. And we're still working our way through the Brexit transition and the change in regulations. So we've got quite a lot of emergency type of issues, business continuity issues that we need to stack up and make sure that we've got everybody in the right place doing the right thing to maximise the resources. So we're working on that now. We're also working on a new ways of working project to look at how we can maximise on home working and learn the really good points from what we've done over the last 6 months, as well as teasing out what could have gone better and putting in place some processes to make sure that we use that to the best benefit for staff and for the council going forward. And we're ongoing flex and review of arrangements. It is very flexible, as you'll be aware. Circumstances change, the announcements from government change every day. So we have staff who currently work in the county but live outside of the county, some of which are now in local lockdown areas. So we're having to continually think of all of these arrangements that we need to put in place for everybody. And just in terms of what we've learned, I think the positive points are that the workforce has been incredibly adaptable and resilient, more than we could have really hoped for. We've got positive staff who have really assisted, and where we've got the more vulnerable staff, we've been able to use teams to help and to work with them. We've been able to provide services throughout. We've even improved service provision in some areas, particularly around revenues, where the number of cases, I think, has actually increased, where people can get through the work quicker, working with different technology from home. So that's been a benefit, and we're going to be learning from those cases. We've had a rapid advance in the use of technology, as you'll be aware from this morning's Zoom session. But again, sometimes the implementation of new technology can take a while. But with this, it really was an overnight learning curve, and we managed to put in remote and home working technology very, very quickly. There's definitely been a we're in this together culture, and I think I can say that I'm really proud of all the staff that have worked together over the last 6 months. They've been fantastic. They've looked after each other, and they've pulled together a hybrid approach, so working from home, working on rotas, working in the office, out on the patch to do everything they can. And I've put 3 bullet points at the end there, just for something that you might want to consider in your project. We have agreed that there is no substitute for face-to-face meetings. We miss them, maybe not as often as we used to have them, but we do miss that debate, that ability to have informal meetings to kind of bounce ideas around. We have had some isolation issues, which I mentioned earlier, and that kind of building of rapport has been very valued, and we miss that as well. So where we've had new employees start during the COVID period, we haven't been able to do the inductions, walk around the buildings, introduce them to other colleagues. So there is no substitute for some of that stuff, and hopefully we'll be able to get to a good balance in the future. And then Amy, just following on from that, there's just a few slides to give you some idea of how the community supported the team. So lots of thank you letters, if you just want to carry on paging through, which really helped the staff. The morale was really good. They picked them up. They had occasionally a box of biscuits left for them, a few bits and pieces. So yeah, they did a fantastic job. That's the overview. Sorry if I've rattled through it. I will make sure you get sent the slides. And I've got some numbers with me as well, which I can also send out to you. So things like the numbers of people we've looked after in terms of the vulnerable, the numbers of parcels that we sent out, the stickers on the waste bins, the business support grants, got lots of facts and figures if you're interested in any of that information as well, which I can send through, but I won't waffle on anymore. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions from us? Yeah, Councillor Jones.
You're on mute.
You're on mute.
Sorry.
I think I'm on now properly. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I think you all did an amazing job, and it's unbelievable, really, the work that was put in and all you achieved. One of the things I felt a little bit disappointed in is that I'm at home, isolated, doing very little. And I could have helped out, and I did offer, but nobody came back to me, because I would quite like to have perhaps phone people up just to give them some reassurance, people who are on their own. So please don't forget us if you need any more help.
Thank you. That's a really interesting comment. I think we could have done more with the volunteers schemes. As you say, especially that befriending part of the work. I think we found over 7,000 people, some of whom just wanted a daily phone call. So I'll definitely take that on board. I think it's definitely something we could implement in the future. So thank you for that.
I think if I may, actually, that was organised from very early on. You could register with either the NHS or Derbyshire County Council. I did register with Derbyshire County Council, and I was helping. I was doing shopping, and they were making phone calls. So they were putting us into contact. I think what would have happened with the district, you kind of started by doing your own thing, and I don't mean that in a bad way, because you were very proactive straight away. But you started doing your own thing, and it might be the reason why some of us didn't register with the main area, but definitely calling people who needed a friendly chat. I was able to do that because I registered with the Derbyshire County Council, and they had more volunteers than they had people needing help. So I would suggest that in future you do encourage everybody to register, and then if people need you, then it's like a centralized way of organizing the volunteers. I thought it was very well organized from the very beginning. Any other questions? No? So I've got one question. You mentioned a bit earlier on in your presentation about some specific issues with, for example, single parents working from home, and we did discuss that as a committee, that not everybody will have found that working from home was really good for them. So, and we're very well aware of that. And as a committee, we did say that we wanted to look at the risks. So one of the risks is obviously the mental health of staff, especially those who are, like you say, single parents, etc. And you did say that you were calling them on a regular basis to make sure that you were supporting them. So who's we? Is it the support group that you set up from very early on, or is it the manager for that person, specifically for that member of staff?
So yeah, what happened was that each service manager and heads of service were asked on regular occurrences, really, to make sure that they were in regular contact with all of their staff, and that they were aware of how they were getting on, what the arrangements were for working from home. There was lots of conversations just around the operational side of things. So just from doing that, the managers were able to build up a little bit of a picture about each member of staff in terms of their family circumstances, which ones had very young children at home. Particularly, I'm aware of 2 cases, I think, where we had issues where they felt very isolated. And in those cases, the service managers and also the head of service was very proactively involved in making sure that that person was supported as much as possible, offering things like annual leave to have a bit of a rest. Also offering the ability for them to come into the office and also kind of buddying up with other people that wanted to come in the office. So they were both in on the same day within the COVID restrictions, but allowing them to be able to see other people and to have conversations in the office. So that was very much done on a supervisor and head of service level. Also, one of the things that I was really encouraged by, and I know a lot of you won't be fans of Facebook or kind of social media, but to some extent, if people saw some of their colleagues struggling on social media, they reported that in as well. So if, for instance, somebody was putting a little bit of a strange message on social media very late at night about being lonely or those kinds of things, they were being picked up by colleagues and then making sure that that person was phoned the next day and discussing those issues with them. So it wasn't just a workplace thing, it was more of a friendship group as well that was set up. And they also used WhatsApp in some areas, so set up working groups in WhatsApp chat groups to be able to continually stay in contact, and having some informal Zoom meetings as well, so not just work-based Zoom meetings, but kind of a coffee morning for people to Zoom in with workplace issues, but also checking up that everybody was okay. So there's quite a lot done by managers and heads of service to that extent.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? I think we've covered quite a lot. So my question personally is, obviously we're looking going forward, how we're going to set up things if we are going to have more working from home, etc. From your point of view, as part of your, because one of the aspects you mentioned in the last comments you made about the lack of informal meetings in between and conversation between members of staff, obviously face-to-face is quite crucial in some areas. So how do you feel that moving forward that could be included in your working from home sort of policy? How would you make it work?
Yeah, we're very much aware that those kind of informal meetings have got a great benefit. I don't think we realised it. Sometimes you don't realise what you're missing, do you, until it's gone. So we have set up a working group who are working through all of those issues, doing a really good job on it so far, working with myself and the other directors and Sarah to look at how we can take the best bits of what we've learned, but also improve on some of the things that haven't gone so well. And they're looking at some hybrid options. So how can we get the best of both worlds across both councils, because some teams like environmental health work across the strategic alliance. They're hoping to come up with some really practical ideas, looking at technology, looking at rota systems to come into the office, safe working environments, all of that, especially the IT side of thing, is going to be a piece of work that's going to be emerging over the next couple of weeks, maybe month or so. We'll be able to update you on that as far as your piece of work's concerned on a regular basis, because it's a really live, ongoing piece of work. We're very conscious of the second wave of COVID, and it may mean that we're having to continue like this for at least another 6 months. The Prime Minister suggested that people should continue to work from home recently. So we are trying to get the best of both worlds, and we're going to be issuing more information about that very soon. So Sarah and myself will be able to keep you updated on that, how that progresses.
Great. Councillor Birkin.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for answering my next question, Karen. What I was going to say was it'd be useful if you could record for us what sort of issues has the pandemic problem shown up in the existing working from home policy. I think Sarah mentioned before that you sort of had to hit the ground running because a lot of things were happening very quickly and changing very quickly. So you've had to adapt very, very quickly, and it sounds as if you've done that very well from the information that we've got and directly from you today, but other stuff as well. So what had been going through my mind is having had to change things very quickly because of the pandemic, what what sort of issues with the existing policy has that shown that would either working well or needed to amend it? Because often that's an opportunity for changing or having to change a policy is when something has happened. It's only when something as drastic as COVID happens that you may realise, oh, we didn't have that part of it. We didn't have opportunity or information within the policy to cope with that because it had never happened. It's never come up before. It's that emergency situation that you mentioned. So I'm looking for some information from yourself or Sarah as to that sort of point of view as well. You also mentioned the home working survey and that workstation assessment questionnaire. It would be useful, I think, for us to get that sort of information when we're reviewing the whole thing as well, if that's possible, please. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, just to answer those, it's definitely possible to get the information through in the surveys. In terms of what we've learned from our home working current process, Sarah might be able to assist in a bit more detail than me, but as you say, we did jump into it, with the majority of the workforce overnight. So we have learned some lessons, and I think particularly around workstations, making sure that we've got the telephony set up properly so that the customer contact centres and anybody turning up face to face in the customer contact centres can get the answers that they need from people at home. And that communication needs to be very good. It needs to be second to none, really. We can't have members of the public hanging around waiting for long periods of time for their questions to be answered. But in terms of the practicalities of it, Sarah, can you add any more to what I've said? Thanks.
Yeah, no problem. I think one of the key things that we've looked to address during it is to make sure that it isn't overly bureaucratic and there aren't, lots of steps in there and a massive long policy that a manager has to read through. So it's making sure we get the message across, but in an easier format for managers and employees to be able to follow. So it doesn't look as intimidating and put people off looking at the home working option. As Karen mentioned, it's about looking at the practicalities and making sure that we have solutions to those, but look at a range of solutions rather than just saying it has to be that or it has to be this, so that we're reflecting the needs of each service area. So I think those are the key things moving forward that I think we need to include in the new policy, just so that we have got that inbuilt flexibility in there so that we can make those changes, but everybody also knows the core principles that we're looking to achieve from this, so that if there are any managers or employees that aren't adhering to those, we have made it clear from the outset what those expectations are, particularly in relation to what we were discussing earlier, the safe working environment at home, so that people don't end up with long-term issues, say from sitting on a certain chair and you end up with a bad back.
Any other questions on this presentation? No? Well, thank you very much. And I do think that I agree with the Councillor Jones' comments. The staff, you have got to be very impressed with how very quickly the staff has responded to the crisis and how well they all got together to work very effectively, I think, over the last few months. And especially when it comes to the IT, I know we've had a few hiccups, but that's to be expected when we've got big organizations. But we're getting there, and I think it's unprecedented circumstances that we've all kind of gone out a little bit towards making things better, but also being able to actually still fulfill our duties either as councillors or as managers or as members of staff under very strange circumstances. And I think that, credit's got to be given to the staff as well and the HR department as well, because I know Sarah will have had to deal with daily changes in the guidance and having to implement guidance whereby before you might have had a few months at least to create new policies for the councils when new guidance are coming out of government. This time you only had one day and then you had to implement them straight away. So I appreciate that the stress and the circumstances were quite difficult to start with. So I'm sure I speak on behalf of all members of this committee to say that thank you and well done. Well done.
Thank you. Thanks.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you,
thank you.
Karen. You're free to go. If you want to stay, you're welcome to stay as well, but I'm sure you'll have plenty to do. Sarah, I'm not sure if we still need you. Sue will be able to remind me. Do we still need Sarah for the rest of the agenda? I don't think we do we?
We don't, Chair, no.
We don't.
No, that's fair enough. Thank you very much,
Sarah. Yeah, thank you very much
Bye.
for your help. And we'll be asking you to come and visit us again very soon, and especially once you have a draft for us.
Yes.
Ready to
No
consider.
problem.
It'd be great if we could have it, and then we could ask questions and put comments forward as well as members of this committee. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so this was quite interesting. So we'll just move on to the next item, which is the forward plan for 15 August to 15 September 2020. We all had a chance to have a look at the forward plan. Do we have any questions or comments that we want to put forward? No. Okay. So the next item on the agenda is the work program, which is page 57, I believe. Yeah, 57. Well, actually, it starts on 56. My apologies. So are we all happy? So we've gone through the 23rd of June. We've got 4th of August done, 29th of September. So we've gone through the agenda for 29th of September. And then on the 3rd of November, we've got some further interviews planned with the Director of Corporate Services and Head of Transformation and Partnerships, managers and staff working from home during the pandemics. So let's hope that we will have a number of staff agreeing to speak to us. So if you could work your magic on that, because last time I don't think we had many wanting to speak to us, apart from when we had a walkabout. And obviously we can't have a walkabout, so that's replacing the walkabout.
Yes, Chair. I mean, that's interesting, isn't it? I think possibly the walkabout might have done us some favours, really, because I think staff realised the benefit of it. So I'm hoping, obviously, we'll see what comes in, and then I'll do a bit of, speaking to teams individually to try and encourage them. But we'll see what we get.
Great, thank you. So any comments or questions on the work plan? It's quite straightforward. No? Okay, so the next item, so we're happy to move on to the next item. We haven't got any additional urgent items. So we just agree the next meeting, which is the 3rd of November 2020 at 10 a.m., which is the meeting as per our diary. Councillor Birkin.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quickie, most probably to Sue. I think Sarah just said in there that this was the working from home policy is a long-standing policy. I just wondered if there was a protocol or a policy for reviewing policies on a regular basis. It's something that when I was a school governor, you're required to do, and you ended up trying to do 60 or 70 every couple of years. I just wondered if there's anything within our systems whereby there's a requirement for a policy to be looked at every, 2 years or something like that.
Yes, if I can, Chair. Yes, we do have processes in place. There's a guidance for how policies should be reviewed with various things about the steps you have to go through, including the one about scrutiny, that it has to be offered up to scrutiny for consideration if they wish to look at it. So that is available on the intranet, and there is a deadline. Usually it was on the internet. I've not looked at it recently, but I used to trawl through it quite regularly, and it sets out what the policy is, and when it was, last reviewed, and when it's reviewed in the future. So it is there on the internet, and obviously it varies between the policies as to the timescale. I think given the pandemic, obviously things are a little bit more pressing now, so I think there might be a review of 1 or 2 policies depending on how we proceed. So the arrangements are in place, and if you want to see the actual document, I can send you a copy if you want.
Okay.
Yes, please, if you could, Sue. Thank you. I'd appreciate a copy. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay.
Is that all the committee that want to see that, or just Councillor Birkin?
I'm sure you could email it to all the committee members. That'd be useful information anyway, just to have as a background information anyway. Thank you.
I'll do that, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll move on. I'll close the meeting here actually, because we've got nothing else on the agenda. The next meeting is on the 3rd of November. Excuse me. But just to remind my members that we did say early on that we would do the questionnaire via email. So if you think of any questions that we want to ask the staff, let's get a few questions ready in advance and send to Sue. If you could copy all members of the committee, that would be quite useful as well. Okay. Well, thank you very much for your attendance, and we'll see you all again very soon. Take care. Thank you.